Okay, welcome back everybody. This is going to be a instructional video on the Universal Wing, how you attach it to hydrofoils, how it can attach to different fuselages, and for an example, I'm going to attach it to the fuselage, the aluminum fuselage that comes with some of the other kits. So the exact example I'm using here, this is the Universal 2300 wing. I am not going to show the step-by-step process how to glass up the wing itself. That has already been covered. You can find that in the build videos. We build the 1500 what would be the 1500 Universal Wing in that video, and I show you how you lay the fiberglass down layer by layer, trim, cut, pour the edges, fill in this part right here. That's covered in that video. So to see those details, go over to that video, check it out. It's on the website, it's on YouTube. That'll show you everything you need to know to glass the wing up itself. Where the difference is, what I've already gone ahead is if you get the aluminum kit, it will come with these holes already drilled out. If you get the Universal Wing on its own, this slot, the mounting slot, is going to be blank. There will be no holes there because I don't know what you're attaching it to. I don't know what sort of hole spacing you're going to need. So that's left up to you to measure and decide. So to attach the fuselage that I'm going to use, I took the spacing of the holes on that fuselage and I just transferred them into the mounting slot here and I drilled them out. And then I just took some masking tape and put it here. So for example, I have the masking tape placed right there. And then you flip the wing over, make sure it's level. So if you were to place it, say on the roll of tape, place it down, it's going to be sitting level because otherwise the curved tips will keep it, it'll rock back and forth. So we have it level. And then I'm just going to pour some epoxy in the holes that we drilled. It depends. If you're using fast curing epoxy, maybe 3 hours or less, you might want to pour this portion halfway up in each hole, let that almost fully cure, and then pour the other half. I've had it happen once, and since then I learned and I haven't done it again, where I poured these straight up all at once, and as the epoxy cures it will heat up and it can start to melt the foam around the edges. That's a problem we want to avoid. So take a little extra time, maybe do it twice, and that'll avoid any excess heat building up when we do that process. Alright, so once that cures, and these are cured obviously, you can flip it over, carefully take your tape off. This will be nice and smooth. It's still a good idea just to hit it with some sandpaper very lightly, being delicate around the foam area. So I'm going to get to work glassing this wing up. When I come back, this wing's going to be fully glassed up. As mentioned before, you can see that in the other build videos. But yep, when this comes back, we'll be getting into the fine details of putting in our fuselage into the mounting area. There's a few ways to do it. So we're going to be going over those and explaining the process step by step, because it is a pretty simple process. It's not overly complicated. If you take 10 minutes to set everything up and line everything up and double check, things are going to go pretty smoothly for you and you're going to get a very, very nice fit. Alright, so I did all the hard work, got this wing glassed up. I did put a carbon skin over it. I typically don't do that, but I had some extra laying around, so I figured why not? Let's make this look higher end, I guess. So this is the setup I'm going to be using to get my fuselage into the wing slot. Now this is the Universal Wing, so you can put it on almost any fuselage. For my aluminum frames, this is what it looks like, and the reason this is all dirty is because I've done this process with this exact fuselage, I don't know, 20 times, so and I never clean it off, which I probably should. But this is my fuselage shape, and this just sits right in there. And I am going to be building a lot of foils nowadays, the fuselage inserts into like a tunnel, a tube, and so I'm going to be doing that for this here as well, so it'll work with all those other types of fuselages. So the most important thing to doing this right is just to take some time in your setup, because we want to make sure that we have everything running true and at the correct angles. So I'm lifting up the wing here, and I have these blocks, and I know these are flat. And what those are going to do is those blocks are going to sit, the wing is going to sit on these blocks. And now I know that the wing's angle of attack is now flat to the table surface. Okay, we don't want this wing sitting here angled up like this, angled down like that. So normally it's going to be sitting flat in this direction, right? But we want to make sure that its pitch is flat relative to the table. A few degrees here and there might pose a problem. If 1 degree, not the end of the world, but you know, if you start getting a lot of pitch in there, it's not going to be ideal. So when I sit this down here, I know it's flat relative to my table surface. So the next thing we're going to want to make sure that we get set up correctly is we don't want this fuselage being angled inward, angled that way. We want to make sure it's running straight, right, and perpendicular to the trailing edge of the wing, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So it's probably a bit faint on the camera, but I drew one line with the straight edge going here, and then I used a square to draw a separate line at exactly 90 degrees, and that keeps running down here, so there's plenty of extra room. So using that line, what I'm going to do is I'm standing above the wing here, and I'm going to match the trailing edge with this line. Okay, so once I get that lined up, and I believe it's pretty even, that's your starting point. Now what I can do with the fuselage is, you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but the line continues here, and I'm standing directly over my fuselage, and I'm trying to line up the very front of the fuselage with that line. I'm making sure it's centered in the slot, and then working backwards here, we can see the other end of the line, and that needs to be moved over just a bit there. So if this fuselage is lined up with the line that's going this way, that means it's perfectly 90 degrees with our wing, and we're all set. Now in this particular mass fuselage, there's 3 holes, and I want to make sure that those are lined up with the 3 holes we drilled through the wing. If you have 2, make sure they're lined up with the 2 holes that you drilled. If you have 1, make sure they're lined up. So with these holes lined up there, we want to make sure that this fuselage, just like our wing, is flat and has 0 angle of attack. We don't want it like this. We don't want it pointing down the other way. So we know our wing is flat to the table. Now we want to make sure that this fuselage is flat to the table, and then we'll all be in the same plane, right? So there's a couple ways to do this. The first and easiest way is if you have a bubble level. I can place this on here and see that it's flat. That's great. If you don't have a bubble level, you can take a measurement. I have this little ruler right here. If I take a measurement from right here, I am at 6 centimeters. And then if I come to the back here, same thing, 6 centimeters. So we're level. So make sure you have a sturdy base, making sure that the fuselage is level. I'm using a roll of tape, this block, and then I wanted to get it up another 1.5 millimeters or so. So I folded up this little piece of paper there, nice and flat, and I have it sitting there, and that just gives you a millimeter shim or so. So once that's level in that direction, the last place we want to double check is that our fuselage isn't rolling over. You really can only do that once you put the epoxy in here. It's just nice to check that a few times. Again, a bubble level is going to be your best bet. So we're checking that it's level, that our fuselage is level this way. I'm lucky in here that this fuselage is nice and flat. in the center so I can check it that way. If it wasn't, a lot of fuselages are obviously round. I would recommend putting your mast in, and then you can take a bubble level off of that mast. Now, if you're doing it that way, you might have to support that mast so that it doesn't roll over as it cures. There's a lot of ways to do that. So that's the one last direction. You want to make sure everything's lined up. So that's the basic setup process, making sure everything's on the same plane and 90 degrees and 0 angle of attack. And so now that we have that established, we're going to get started on epoxying up. So first things first is we want to make sure that our fuselage does not stick into the mount when we epoxy it. And so this is release wax. It's pretty much just wax. Any sort of wax or release-like agent will work. Chapstick, Vaseline, things along those natures. I would recommend doing some research. The wing glassing kit does have a little container of this, just enough to get this job done. So the first thing we want to do is just fill in these holes a little bit. Just kind of pack some wax into those. We don't want to get epoxy up into our threads because that would definitely not be fun. So pack those up. You can't really use too much of this stuff, and now I'm just rubbing it all over. And again, I've used this one about a dozen times or so, so it's got the, you can see the residue on it when it's dry. It comes right off. This is the only thing I use this particular fuselage for, so I just keep it as it is and just coat the surfaces. Okay, so we're all coated here, and I would recommend doing this first so you don't forget. And it's okay if it's on there and it dries. It's still gonna do its thing. Alrighty, so I have my thickened epoxy mixed up right in here, and I'm just going to. Okay, so I've been laying down that thick epoxy, just covering the bottom with a good amount. So now with all that epoxy in there, I'm going to place the fuselage in and get it lined up mostly, not perfectly at the moment. Once that's in, you probably get some squeeze out. You should get a little bit of squeeze out. I'm just going to kind of smooth everything out. Okay, so you can see this is all filled in pretty much up to the rim. Now, as this is still kind of in its putty state, you can gently go in there and smooth things out. So your fuselage might be different than this, but with this particular fuselage, I can cover that tip a little bit with epoxy so it goes down and into it, and I'll still be able to easily get this fuselage to pop out. You don't want to completely cover something at this stage because you'll see why later on why you wouldn't want to do that, but I pretty much have this completely filled in with that epoxy, flush up to the rim, and I'm just gonna keep an eye on it as it starts to thicken up, make sure it doesn't start running down my wing here. And now is the time you want to go through and quadruple check everything, because you can make fine adjustments. Right now, if you notice that the fuselage is off by a couple millimeters to the side, you can bump it gently and still come in and smooth this out. You probably won't even have to mess with that anymore. If you notice your wing's out of alignment, shift that a little bit. And right now is the best time to make sure that the fuselage is flat this way. So if I take this level and place it on here, I can see that I am spot on. And if you have your mast on there, that's going to make it a little bit easier, although your setup might be obviously a bit different than this because you need to hold that mast up. Just taking a closer look in here. So as you guys saw, 90% of this is just getting the setup right. And of course your setup's going to be completely different. I mean, you're going to be using other stuff, but the same principles apply. Just get a flat surface, make sure that all your surfaces and your wing is level to the table, the fuselage is level to the table, and that you have perpendicular and 90 degrees all around. So once you get that setup right, I mean, just filling this in takes 2 seconds. And then just double check your measurements and make sure everything's square. And now just let this cure up. So it's been a few hours and I'm pretty sure this is now cured up. And so I'm going to try and break free the fuselage. Yep. And I'm just gonna slowly take it out. And there we go. So that came out very easy. Sometimes it's a little bit of a pop. Other times it just kind of slowly slides on out. But that came out very nice. Just take a look at that. So there's a couple things. You can see we have that nice mold look in there. You can always clean up the edges. I'm definitely going to clean up these edges. And I'm going to carefully take this wax away because I don't want it falling out and getting on my wing surface because I haven't given it a clear coat yet. But what I really love about when you do the wings in this style is, or when you mold the fuselage in there, is once we remove that wax, we'll be able to see exactly where the holes were, so we know exactly where to drill. So you don't have to remeasure and, you know, drill in the wrong place. It's where that wax is, that's where you drill the hole. So that's the next step, is I'm going to just clean that wax off and then I'm going to drill the holes in there for the bolts. Alright, so I went and drilled those holes out, and if you want, with this particular style of fuselage, I mean, you could fit this in nice and tight, screw it in, and you're good to go. But a lot of hydrofoils have those, it's like it's completely covered. It completely inserts into the wing, and I'm going to do that with this wing as well. So really all I would have to do is just shove this in there and just put in one screw, and that's going to secure it in place. So to start off this process, I'm once again going to really make sure everything is nice and filled with wax. I'm going to completely wax in these holes here and then get the wax all over. I'm using a bit much here. I just want to make sure you guys can see that on the camera. You don't need near as much as I'm using, but really make sure that everything has a nice layer of wax on it. Even though this looks pretty dirty, it's actually smooth to the touch. There's no jagged edges, so that's going to really help as we go to pull this one out after we get this process done. So that's looking pretty good. Always cover a little bit further back than you think you're going to need. So I am also going to very carefully put some wax down on the bottom of this part that we just did. I'm being very careful not to get it on the surrounding area. If you can tell, I gave that side just a quick sand, about an inch, 2 inches around. That's going to give this next step something to bond to. So lay this down, get some good wax in there, release agent. And when these two surfaces come to meet, oh, not good. When these come to meet, they'll really fill up and seal because we don't want a lot of epoxy getting down into this area. Alright, so that's waxed up in there. We have the fuselage nice and waxed up. Now I'm going to place it back into position. And there we go. Now we don't have to worry about alignment because this is so tight fitting that that's it, it's aligned. Still here you can see I have that same setup. It's just not as crucial at this point. Now everything's nice in and solid there. So just a quick overcap of what we're going to do is we're going to mix up the same putty. It's basically the same thing in reverse. I'm going to get that in this area, kind of make it what they call a fillet, which is just a smooth transition. And then I'm going to lay some glass down, and then to go with the carbon theme, I'm going to lay a nicely trimmed piece of carbon over that. And then we're going to let that cure, and then we're going to bang out this fuselage. Alright, so here is the thickened stuff once again. I'm just going to get it as neat as I can placed around the fuselage. So now I'm going to quickly clean that up, try and even things out a bit. And now I'm going to put down the first of what will be a good amount of glass. So now we're just going to start layering up the glass to build up a nice laminate. So when I mixed up that last batch, I saved a little bit of regular epoxy just to wet out these layers. Alright, so hopefully you can see I have all that laid up there nice and thick over the top. I'm not seeing any air bubbles. Everything is pretty evenly laid out and smooth. And so if I wasn't doing a carbon wing, I wouldn't be doing this process. I would have just probably put one big piece of glass just to kind of clean that up. But because I am doing a carbon fiber wing, I'm just going to try to neatly get this on there just to tidy everything up. Okay, so I got that top piece on, and now I'm just going to let it cure. Kind of pay attention, make sure that this portion here is still hugging the mast. Maybe as it cures it starts to pull away, and then you can always kind of just come back and smooth it back into place where it should be. Alright, so this is fully cured, and now it's time to remove the fuselage. It's going to be a little bit more difficult than the last time because it's fully encased and we can't really lift it up and out. We have to just literally yank it out. So it's best to be careful doing it, and then also, you know, it helps just to wiggle the fuselage side to side, up and down, in all the directions as you kind of pull it out. And if it's not coming out at first, just again wiggle it a little bit more, and worst comes to worst, take a rubber mallet and you can just bang it on the sides to kind of loosen it up. You should see it start to loosen up around here first, and then it'll eventually just yank out. So actually, just as I'm doing it, I can see and feel that it's already loose. So if yep, there we go. And it came out just like that, right? So not that hard. You can see that all the wax that we put in did its job. And then looking down in there, you can see, you know, we have now the perfect spot for the fuselage. And so this is a great fit. I mean, look at that. That is the most satisfying thing once that's done. So now we have a fantastic fit, and we're pretty much ready to go because we've already drilled out the holes. So that's why we do it before we put on the cap, because you can't really drill the holes now, right? So make sure you drill those holes out before you put on this cap. But yeah, this turned out really well. So if this is all the foils that kind of use this system, this is a good way to do that. With my particular fuselages, it's not 100% necessary, but it's definitely going to make this joint a lot stronger. I would absolutely recommend it, but man, that feels great. Right in. So 3 bolts, right? But with this particular type of connection, you can probably just put 1 center bolt in. I know a lot of the foils that use this kind of attachment just have 1 bolt, and that's because all of this is holding the wing in place, and then that bolt is just keeping it from sliding. So we've effectively done the same thing here. So now that that part is done and we have a perfect fit, I'm just going to come in here with some sandpaper, clean this back area up, sand down any rough spots around here. And as you can see, I still need to give this wing its final coat, so I'm going to sand the entire wing, top, bottom, tape it off, paint on with a brush a nice coat of epoxy on the top, wait for that to cure, and then I'm going to paint on the bottom. And then I'll probably give this wing a sanded finish. I prefer the sanded finish, but a gloss finish can be nice as well. And then after I do all that is when I'm going to get back to you guys, and we'll put this thing together when it's all finished and have a look at it. Alright, so you can see I have my gloss coat on there. Excuse the noise of the machine in the background. But yeah, you can have it cure like this and then do the other side and have that be done. It'll be nice and shiny. I like a sanded finish because you can just get extra smooth with it. You can see I did sand through a couple of these carbon fiber. I sanded through some of the carbon fiber there. I just had to get it smooth. Those were high spots. But they're completely smooth, especially with that nice gloss coat on there. And one other thing to pay attention to, so as we put the gloss coat on, we want to make sure that none gets up and inside of that area where the fuselage goes in. That might prevent it from fitting in there. So just be extra cautious of that. Be very light and careful with the brush as you go around that area. But besides that, this is looking great. Alright, so last we left off, I was going to put that gloss coat on and then start sanding, and I did. I spent about 20 minutes sanding this. I'd say it's about 95% good. If I really wanted to, I could spend a little more time to chase absolute perfection. But you can see how this really smoothed up very nicely. A couple of small... There's a great section, a couple of small dimples, for example, right here. I really could go in there and sand those out, but I am happy with how it is. So I then went in and cleaned up this area very nice. I do kind of wish I cut a piece of carbon fiber that was big enough to actually cover the whole thing. Unfortunately, this did shift forward, but this whole thing is really neat, clean, and smooth. So that's great right there. And so, as mentioned, I cleaned up this fuselage, so it's looking brand spanking new. And check out that fit. I mean, it is on there perfect. It's so satisfying putting that in, and it just makes for such a better joint. So yeah, that fit is fantastic. You can see it's still a little wet in there, as I did just finish wet sanding, but it's just a great fit. And this is, how you would attach a hydrofoil fuselage into that wing. Very simple, pretty much just a pretty easy and quick two-step process, and then just sand it smooth until you get that finish that you desire. I can't wait to go take this one out. It's looking great, and I know it's going to perform really well. So I am a little curious as to what this weighs, and it's looking like 1,200 grams. Oh no. Yep, 1,200 grams or 1.2 kilograms. So 1,200 grams, and that comes out to 2.6 pounds. So, I mean, it is very light. I've built these out of wood before, and they get very heavy when they're that big. And compared to some other wings out there, this might be up there on the light scale. Definitely for the size of the wing this is. I mean, it's a 2,300 square centimeter wing. It's pretty big. It's about 41 inches. 41 inches in span. So to have that weight there is incredible. And this thing is, I can't flex it. I could barely flex it. And even before I put the carbon skin on there, it was extremely stiff. I didn't put the carbon on there for strength. I really was just looking to get rid of the carbon that I had, and I figured, hey, it might look good, so let's put it on there for the build.